Or to the cloud? Okay.
All right. Did I do it?
Put a thing in the chat.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah.
Mark, you let us unmute.
Okay. All right. All
Let us unmute.
right.
A lot of times he forgets to do that. We're all sitting there trying to talk internally.
Have joined us. I want to make sure everything can be heard. Colleen and Ellie, are you hearing me okay?
I can hear you. It's Ellie.
Okay, great, Ellie. Awesome. We're glad you guys are with us. We also do have this session, I think, recorded because I know there's some folks that wanted to watch afterwards. So we'll hopefully make that. But I'm gonna talk mostly towards these folks, hoping that I can
Well, that's fine.
both ways. So I was given this incredible gift this past summer to be able to go on sabbatical. And that sabbatical was supposed to be a 3-month sabbatical. In reality, it was about a 2-month sabbatical. And then it was interrupted by Jeremy's accident. And so there's a hope that at some day in the future, there will be 1 more month of sabbatical that is taken later on, but that'll be a year or so away. So, but really, it was an amazing 2 months of sabbatical. And I have put together this session to share some of that experience. And I'm so terrible. I'm not one of those people, as you know, I never give titles to my sermons because I never know what the title was until like Saturday, right? So I couldn't print that in advance. Exactly, that's what the title would be. And so I didn't know the title of this until Saturday too, but I thought, okay, here's a good way to title this: Desert Beginning, Water Blessing. Really, I'm just going to be talking about 2 different experiences that were right at the beginning of the time of sabbatical. And I'll start with a little bit of experience in the desert, and then an experience that we had at our family's lake house in Indiana, so New Mexico and Indiana. And I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming to hear a little bit about this. Hopefully you can get a little bit of a sense or a little bit of a taste of this experience. And I just also want to again say how grateful I was for this time. And this was a gift of the congregation. This is an incredible gift that you gave me. And it would have been great in its own right, but boy, was it great when I had to be ready to deal with a major accident in our life. I really feel like I was ready for that in a way that maybe I wouldn't have been before. So thank you for that. Sabbatical began at the desert. And I actually was here on June 19th, led worship that day, left, grabbed my bags, went down to Bozeman, got on a plane and flew to Denver, Colorado, where I met one of my oldest friends, a friend named Jay, and the 2 of us did a road trip down to New Mexico. And we were there to, we went all the way to Abiquiu, New Mexico, which is a place kind of in north central New Mexico that's famous for a retreat center called Ghost Ranch. So if you've ever heard of Ghost Ranch, Georgia O'Keeffe is really famous. She did stuff there. There's a lot of Georgia O'Keeffe kind of memorial stuff that happens at Ghost Ranch. You can go there for artistic retreats. It's a big ranch, but also close to Abiquiu is a place called the Benedictine Monastery of Christ in the Desert. in order to get to this monastery, you're on the main road. Abiquiu is about, a block in terms of its size. And then you kind of keep on going down the highway and you see a sign for the monastery and you turn down this Forest Service road. And it's a 13-mile Forest Service road to the end of the road. And there's the monastery. And it's not a great road. It gets washed out in the rainy season. It is a scary road sometimes. Sometimes, like we were there, we came in on a perfect day, and we were really grateful for that because the next day there were these crazy thunderstorms, and it would have been a scary kind of road to go down. So it is considered one of the most remote Benedictine monasteries, really because of that road in the country. And the first place you come to once you've gone down this beautiful Forest Service road that goes along the Chama River. So it's a place that if any of you are people that go on rivers, people come to the Chama to explore the Chama River. Though at the time we were there was, if you remember, New Mexico this last summer, this whole area, even though there was no fire there was fire worries and fire restrictions. So there weren't people coming in and out of all the camping areas. But as you come down this road and you finally get to 13 miles, the first building that you see is this beautiful little adobe guest house. So this was where my friend Jay and I stayed, right in that room. And it was stunningly beautiful, just a stunningly beautiful, simple but beautiful place to stay. And I wanted to give you a few pictures of when you turn around. So this was us sitting in our little porch area. You saw some of the red rocks. And then just around this area, this is kind of a panoramic of what you're looking at. And I know most of you have traveled and been to lots of places. There is something about the New Mexico high desert. There is just something. I mean, people say it's a sacred place. It certainly has all of these histories of the indigenous peoples that were there, the Spanish peoples that were there coming from what's now Mexico, then eventually Anglo people that came in. So there's a mix of culture, but there's also just this incredible power of the land, which we really felt there. Again, as you then keep on walking down the road, so if the guest house is right about here, you walk down the road and it's maybe about a 15-minute walk to the monastery itself. And this monastery is not actually super old. It was constructed in the mid-20th century, so like the latter half of the 20th century. And I'll pass this down if you're interested. This is the Monastery of Christ in the Desert. And there's a great Thomas Merton, who was a famous 20th century, writes about Christ in the desert. In America, there is no monastic foundation which has found so perfect a desert setting as that of the Chama Canyon in New Mexico, where the small Benedictine Monastery of Christ in the Desert now stands. The place was chosen with careful deliberation, and it is admirable. 13 miles by dirt road from the nearest highway. The monastery rises at a point where the canyon narrows and the road vanishes into rock and bush. The monastic church was designed by the Japanese-American architect, George Nakashima, and it fits perfectly with the setting. Stark, lonely, stately in its simplicity, it gazes out over the sparse irrigated fields into the widening valley. The tower is like a watchman looking for something or someone of whom
No, this is her presentation on her sabbatical.
Oh, okay.
Ellie, just so you know, we hear you, just so you know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want you to know. I always like people to know. We'll hear you. So as you get closer, this church just rises out, and the monastic, the place where the monks actually live, is kind of spread out behind it. And then just the church itself with these kind of amazing cliffs behind them. And there's a lot of beautiful places in the world. This is up there for me. It just was up there in terms of, and this was kind of like early morning clouds, but just this beautiful adobe church. And I tried to get on the inside, like many monastic places, there's a kind of choir. So facing each other, on this side and this side, there are the areas where the monks sit. What's the name of that called? What's the choir? It's the choir. So they, and because basically what the monks do is sing the psalms again and again and again and again. They sing them back and forth. And sometimes they speak them back and forth, and oftentimes they sing them back and forth to each other. So one side sings one verse, the other side sings the other verse, and then it goes back and forth. And then this area, as you're coming in, is reserved for visitors and for guests. And so there's a separation, but the guests and the visitors are welcomed in. But I will admit, this was one of these great moments of learning something in a monastery. So I got there, and I think I came early in the morning. So monks gather for worship multiple times a day for the hours of the day. And it starts at 4 a.m. with vigils. And so it's dark outside, and if you want to come, you can come. And I came, everything is sung in Gregorian chant. And so the monks invite any guest to come, they can join along. So you're singing there. And I remember in the first service that I was at, I was like, I'm kind of getting this. I'm figuring out this Gregorian chant. I'm singing along. Well, like the next service, the guest master who's in charge of the guests, who was this little monk, he was about 5 feet tall, called Brother Andre, who was really funny. He was from Connecticut. He had a great sense of humor, and he was hilarious. But he came over to me and to the other guests and just said, just a reminder that when we all sing, the point is for us to all blend in. To blend in. Not that any of you wouldn't be doing that. And I was duly humbled. I'm really used to trying to lead a congregation. I did, so that was my lesson. Okay. Blend in. But there was this wonderful little thing in our room, and it's on the top with a little quotation, set the clock of your heart. And then on both sides of this are the Sunday or the festival day schedule, and then the daily schedule. And we were really excited because, so I'll just pass it around if you want to look, the daily schedule of all the different hours that you could join for worship or not, depending on what you wanted. The Benedictines are very, very clear about they welcome all visitors as they would welcome Christ. They welcome visitors as Christ, and they welcome you regardless of what your opinions are, what your beliefs are, and you're welcome to join in as much or as little as the monastic life that you, and there, it was so clear, that kind of open hospitality was really clear to us. We got to experience a few of the normal days, the normal schedule, and even though we weren't there over a Sunday, we were there for St. John the Baptist Day, which falls right in that week of June 24th. And their patron saint for this monastery was St. John the Baptist. So it was a really special, important festival day. And we kind of got to feel the difference of the monastery. What's it like on the normal days of the week? What's it like on a Sunday or a festival day? So, little thing. Just a few, let me see if there's a few more. This was just right outside the church. On the left-hand side was this statue of a deer, like the deer that yearns for running streams. So my soul is yearning for you, my God. So that was the psalm quotation that you saw as you were coming in. But there's, as I'm passing around, you know, the daily schedule of hours, vigils, lauds, terce sect, non, vespers, and compline, along with for the monks' daily mass. So that was their gathering. And not all of the monks were there all the time. Some of them were there for some of the hours, some of them were there the other hours. One of the most moving things for me was that there were a few older monks there, older brothers. One of them was in a wheelchair, and it was clear that some of the younger brothers were in charge of caring for him. And so there would be a brother who was in charge of him. They would wheel him in to the choir, and you would hear one of the brothers say, "So now it's Vespers. Now it's Vespers." And it was like such a beautiful, and they'll talk about this, that part of the job of these brothers is to take care of the older brothers in their community. And you just saw that tenderness of here, this brother has been a part of our community for so long. Now they're getting so old. Now they may not know what time of day it is, but we're going to try to orient them to what they've been doing for maybe decade upon decade, which is praying with this community. And we're going to help them through that. It's just really moving to me to kind of watch that from the guest area. Every day, every normal day, there's a time of work, because the Latin phrase for Benedictine monks is ora et labora, which is work and prayer. And the idea is that you spend your life in prayer, but you also spend your life in work, and that there's a balance of that. And so one of the things they invite guests to do is, if you want to, you can join in the work of the monastery for a few hours in the morning. And that was actually great fun. My friend and I, Jay and I, joined in with this. We met some of the other guests. It was a time that people would talk to each other, and we would also talk with the monks, who for the most part keep silence, or keep a lot of silence. But during that work time, gosh, we met these wonderful monks who were literally from all over the world. I mean, from multiple countries in Africa, from Latin America, from parts of Asia. This isn't just a community that's come from the United States. So a real mix of people. And then again, there was this quiet. And one of the things that was new to me, so most of the meals that we had, we experienced in the guest area, except for a few times for the main meal of the day, guests could join the monastic community for their meal. And the way that they have their main meal of the day is somebody reads to them. So there's a reading from a book that they're reading, and then from the Order of St. Benedict. And then they'll say, who's the saint of the day? We're going to learn who the saint of the day or the commemoration of the day is. But for most of the meals, we ate in this small guest area where we were given lots of food to collect from the monks. And then those meals were taken in silence. And there were maybe, during the time that we were there, anywhere between 5 and 12 guests that were there. The number was always changing every day. It is really interesting to be in a room of people, some of whom you know and some of whom you don't know, and to eat with them at table in silence. It was really, and again, the kind of thing that you can kind of think about. I think I'm not like oh, sure, I've experienced silence, but I've never really experienced silence like that. The sharing of a meal with these people that are also guests, but coming with their own stories, their own and it was clear that the people that came were really coming from all different backgrounds. There was a young couple that was there that obviously had probably been married just a year or two ago. There were older people that had come year after year to come to this monastery, and from all over the country, not just from New Mexico. And then, I'll say at one of the sessions later, I'm going to talk some about the books that I read, but I really do feel like I found the amazingly perfect book to read that was in the monastery library. I had come with some books, but then there in the monastery library, as though it was waiting for me, was this amazing book that was basically about the history of silence both as this amazing tool for trying to get more spiritually connected to God. So this idea that silence is this gift, this way that we connect with the Holy Spirit, with God, and the ways that silence can be used as a weapon, as a tool, especially in incarceration. and the creation of solitary confinement. It's an amazing book. And it was really powerful to read in this place where silence was such a beautiful thing, such a gift. But you could also be, I was reminded of the way that silence is, a tool for power, the way that who can wield that silence, who is silent, who gets to choose their silence. I mean, it was a fascinating book to read. So anyway, that's just a little bit about this time. This is the website, so christdesert.org. And I urge you, if you're just bored and want to look something up, they have a great website. They have a lot more wonderful pictures. They have some pictures of the monks themselves. And they have a little farm there, including goats, that they take the goats and sheep that they take the fleece from and make things out of. So, and they also make of goat's milk and sheep's milk soaps. So there's a whole kind of craft that comes out of their farm. So there's some more information about that. Anyway, just a little bit about that. Any thoughts or questions? Yeah. Yeah.
What did they feed you? What kind of food?
I would say it wasn't like super fancy food, but it was good food, and there was an abundance of it, so there might be like at one dinner, there would be like a dish of rice and beans, there would be rice, there would be tortillas, there would be fruit, there would be cheese, there would be always like some setup of some toast or peanut butter if you needed it. I think on Fridays, they did like a fish. So there was like a fish stew one day. They eat generally pretty low on the food chain. So very little bit of not red meat. So mostly vegetarian. But really good, like good food. And lots of options. And it was interesting when my friend Jay remembered this, when we sat with the monks for one of their main meals. So the way that Benedict organized this was that there is a big U shape, and then if there's extra monks, there'll be a central U, and everybody sits facing towards the center. So nobody's facing you in that monastic room for eating, so that you focus on your food and not focus on talking to somebody. Whereas there's these great things in, people that write about Benedict, maybe they realized that bringing brothers together from all over different backgrounds, everybody did a little bit better when they had to keep silence during certain times. So, because you had people that came from very high classes, people that came from low classes, people with lots of different backgrounds. How do you keep that calm? Yeah. They do have a cloistered place that people were not, that guests aren't allowed to go into. So basically behind that church, there was the monastic area that was off limits to guests. So I don't know what those rooms looked like, but they were, monastic. You assume they were kind of their cell, their cell that they stayed in, but not a huge community. I think at the height of this community size, there might have been 70 or 80 monks, but now that number is more like 40. So it's not a huge community, and they do have a relationship with a monastic community, kind of like a sister monastery in Mexico. So there were some back and forth that happened between those monasteries. But for the most part, Benedictine monks are monks that live in one place. They make a vow to that location too. They're there. And you can, there were monks that were there and then they might have left the community. But certainly the idea in making those vows is that you're vowing to be in that place. And one of the things, again, I'll talk about this at a later time, but I read a lot of the Desert Fathers and the Mothers, which were kind of early on in the history of the church, the 3rd, 4th century. We have these bits and pieces of writings of really what was probably the beginning of Christian monastic communities. These people that would go out into the desert and be there. And there's a lot of writing about how shouldn't we stay in, the tendency is to stay in a place for a while and then want to run away from it. right? But the desert fathers and mothers keep saying, go back to stay in that place, because that's what you have to learn. You have to stay in the place that you are. So I think that has come into the Benedictine world, of this idea of trying to get to that location. Other questions or just thoughts about the desert?
Did you visit, Giorgio O'Keeffe's place?
We did visit Ghost Ranch. We just kind of like went through we didn't stay there, but yes, we kind of saw it and saw that location. I was glad to get it in my head.
It's not far away from you.
It's not far at all. I mean, you have to go back that 13-mile road, and then you're kind of right near Abiquiu, and then Ghost Ranch is just a couple of miles away.
And did you feel it?
Well, I mean, I've lived in New Mexico for like a couple of years, and I have lots of I love New Mexico. I think it's great. I didn't have any questions. I certainly felt very, and certainly in the this monastic area. I mean, they're caring. I felt like it was a very safe place to be. I would never have had a question about safety. Anything?
How long did you spend?
We spent 5 days in, so like really a very short period of time. Though, as you know, when you have retreats like that, 5 days can be a pretty profound amount of time too. Like it was pretty remarkable, and it felt I think especially with all of that silence, it felt full. There was like a lot of fullness of that time. So yeah, anyway, some people's cup of tea, some people's not, but it was definitely a place where when my friend and I left, we thought, when are we going to come back? I mean, that was our sense of just how powerful that space had been, that we would want to come back. I will say, and there's some pictures of him on the website, the abbot right now is a relatively new abbot for the community. The abbot is the kind of head monk, and they are voted for by the community. And back in, I think just 2018, the current abbot was voted in as the abbot, and his name is Abbot Christian. And, we just kind of laughed a little bit, because it was like, if you had chosen for the movie who should play the abbot, Abbot Christian was that abbot. Like, he was just so perfect. He was the one that should be the abbot. And we even got to hear him preach at one of the special services, and I was just deeply impressed with him. Just that, again, where you only hear so many words, and yet you get such a sense of somebody by their presence, by their presence across the room. You still get a sense of their presence. So anyway, I'll shift. So that was the desert. And then I flew back to Montana, spent a few days here. There was some Big Sky Broadwaying that was happening here with Ursula. And then our family began this road trip out to the Midwest. And I wouldn't have really thought that this would be something that I would talk about when I was sharing a sabbatical, except for the fact that my dad enlisted me and my 2 cousins, who are also pastors in my generation, to do something at this family reunion we were having. So I'll give a little bit of background, and then I'm going to share some pictures that one of my uncles took, just because they're really profound. And this part, if I said the first part was about desert beginnings, this I'm calling Lake Blessings, because the experience that I had this weekend with my family was kind of a surprising experience of where blessing happens, and also the way that people, it doesn't matter, it seems, what their beliefs are, if they have any sort of faith or religious tradition, people long for a blessing. They want a blessing, even if they don't know what that means. And I experienced that this weekend in this really profound way, and was kind of able to be a part of that. So I realized that's something I wanted to share. But I'll give a little bit of background. So My paternal family, way back when, my great-grandfather, who was in 1921, exactly, way back when, he was a Lutheran school teacher and a Lutheran musician named George Weller. And he didn't have much money at all. Boy, they were scraping by, but he and a fellow school teacher at the Lutheran school he taught at managed to purchase a lake cottage on a lake called Lake James in northeastern Indiana, near Angola, Indiana. At that point in time, they all lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And this was, maybe like, how many, 50 miles away. And people said, how could you buy a place that's so far away, 50 miles? That's crazy. There's nobody up there. It's like out in the wilderness, but he and his friend did this. And eventually the friend that he purchased this with sold his part to the Weller family, and it became our family's cottage. Multiple people owned it over the years, different permutations and combinations of family members. But in 2016, so not too long ago, the family decided to create an LLC and made this family cottage into something that would be held by the family communally, that when anybody who was either by blood or by adoption descendant of George Weller, when they reached the age of 25, they would become a partial owner of this cottage. And so this year, the first of Ursula's generation, the 5th generation, turned 25. And so now we have the 5th generation of people in our family unit that is a kind of owner of this cottage. So 2021 was 100 years. We planned a big 100-year gathering for 2021. And then we put it off for a year because it was just a little too crazy during COVID. And so 2022, this was going to be the 100 years of this cottage being a part of the family, big family reunion, kind of celebrating that 100 years. George Weller, the original George Weller, had 5 kids, and then one of those kids had another 6 kids. So the family is large. There's a lot of, Ursula, how many are in your generation now? 30 in your generation. And lots of kind of cousins, second cousins, third cousins that are still kept kind of held together. Other people in the family have bought property on this lake, so it has become a kind of gathering. But there was a concert planned for a while. There's a lot of music in the larger Weller and now Schmidt family. And so my dad helped plan a kind of recital concert that a lot of people took part in. We had a whole variety of music, from very classical to folk music to jazz music to all sorts of music that were a part of this recital. But while he was planning that, my dad came to the 3 of us and said, people may be in a lot of different places about religion now, but there was a strong kind of Lutheran tradition in this cottage. And way back when, in the 1920s, when people from Fort Wayne, who tended to be these Lutherans from Fort Wayne, would come up to Lake James for parts of their summer, there were worship services that were held on the lawn of our cottage because people would still have church. And my dad said to us, I think that there should be some sort of worship service that remembers and gives thanks for our ancestors and for the people that made this possible. And it's also just a time of celebration. So the 3 of us got together. And what I thought was so cool about this was, so this is my cousin Gretchen. Gretchen is a pastor out in Seattle. She's a DLCA pastor. I always say, like, she is like the cool Lutheran pastor. She's got amazing tattoos up and down her arms and all over her body. She is a musician and a songwriter. She is just has an incredible amount of life and energy, and has pastored in various areas, but for the last many years in the Seattle area. Then my cousin Carl, who married into the family. My cousin Kendra is my blood cousin, and she married Carl. Carl is a Missouri Synod Lutheran pastor. And if you all know about the Missouri Synod Lutherans and the ELCA Lutherans, they don't always get along, right? They don't. Like, there's a reason that our church is a shared ministry of the Episcopal Church and the ELCA, not the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church and the ELCA. And yet, my cousin Carl was all about planning a worship service with us. And so the three of us got together kind of in the preceding months and did some planning and planned this service. And then, you know, my cousin Gretchen, who knows how to put together really great bulletins, even came up with the bulletins. So I'll pass that around. You know, my cousin Gretchen's a musician. Carl is an artist. He's a really amazing visual artist and does a lot of, even though he's a pastor of a fairly large church in the Chicago suburbs, like he is in charge of a lot of people. He also tries to continue to do a lot of visual art in his life, and does visual art with his family, with his kids. And so we really wanted to bring some of these different gifts into the service. So Gretchen wrote a song that became a prayer refrain that we used. And Carl created this kind of amazing communal art project that we could all be a part of, but he would make it look good at the end. So we could, but all the kids, all these different generations could be a part of. And I ended up sharing a message, but then kind of as an afterthought, we said, here we are by the lake. So many people feel like this lake is a blessing, is a place of blessing. We should invite people, if they want to come down to the lake for a blessing at the water. And that might mean a lot of different things to different people. So my cousin Gretchen was playing music and Carl was organizing the art. And so I was down in the water. And I think I just want to show some of these pictures because I wasn't even thinking much about this, much of this part of the service. And then, you know, something kind of happened for me, and I think for a lot of the people. So here's some of this. This was just the setup. We were kind of getting people were setting up, kind of looking out towards the lake. So this was kind of this time of blessing. And I'm just going to show these pictures. Those are just some of the pictures. One of those moments where I thought, oh, maybe, you know, 4 people will come down, right? And then just people just started coming and coming. I keep thinking about this time because I keep thinking, like, why is it people long for a blessing? You know, want a blessing. And that meant so many different things. And I kind of had these exchanges with everybody who came down. I knew some people were kind of deeply a part of the church. Some people were deeply not a part of the church. You know, and we kind of, I would have these exchanges and then just gave these blessings. And every blessing was different. I mean, there were families that came up. You know, one of my families, everybody, the family unit came up. The daughter that wasn't there has gone through really intensive, awful breast cancer treatment this last year. And they just came up and said, we need a blessing for Emily, you know, and other people coming up and saying, this is the place that we got married. We want a blessing on our marriage, you know, or we just want a blessing. Just so many kind of profound, different desires for a blessing. And of course, there's, you know, there's something powerful about kind of standing in a lake, right? A lake that has all these memories. But of course, as you all know, like in experiences like that, you know, the person who gets to be a part of that blessing is blessed, right? It was just this incredibly deep blessing to be a part of that. And I thought, that's never going to happen. This is the time. This is one of those times where somehow these two ELCA pastors and one Missouri Synod pastor have come together, and there have been a whole bunch of people that are here, and we are able to share in this time of blessing each other. And it's this is a once in a lifetime thing. You know, this is something we need to hold on to. But I think I just wanted to share that question, or that kind of wondering for me about what is it that we're looking for in a blessing? What does that word mean to us when we think about our lives, our families, our friends, the people that we care about, and that word blessing? What does that mean for us? And I kind of feel like as we come into this season of Advent, it's a good time to kind of think about what is both the blessing that I long for, but also what are the blessings that I can give, that I can share? What is the way that I am able to share in blessing other people? So that's probably all I need to say, but any thoughts or questions or comments? Oh, no, I don't.
Well, it sounds like you almost had opposite experience. Seclusion of the monastery.
Huge family. Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. That it's like these very starkly different, you know, that kind of how are you, like if I experience my own, like obviously I was blessed in that desert silence, you know, monastic environment, and then also deeply blessed in what was not a silent environment at all. Late into the night. My family we stayed at this cottage, which can house a lot of people, but not with a lot of soundproofing. So I actually, Ursula was deeply impressed. Usually sees the book, but there I was at 12 or 12:30 at night, and Ursula came up, Mama, you're awake. Like it was like, oh, you're not totally lost. You can stay up late. Yeah.
Thunderstorms,
Thunder.
jumping in the lake.
Yeah.
Well, it was raining, kind of thunderstorming, which probably wasn't the best idea. So we have my dad to blame for that. Of course, my dad is the supervisor.
You know, I got a sense watching them, a huge sense of credit for the experience of home. Yang and Yang.
And I mean, it continues, Trish, right? Like the gratitude for all that. Probably the next session I'll do in a couple of weeks, I'll talk about more of just the backpacking experiences. And for those of you that like to see pictures of mountains, I'll pull out some of the mountain pictures. But, and I have just incredible, gratitude for that. But yes, that these two were kind of the beginning touch points for the rest of the time. Just deep gratitude, and gratitude for what you don't necessarily plan on, like how it just happens, like that. Oh, that's what that's what, so often it's like, oh, that's how I was blessed. And I couldn't have planned on it. I couldn't have known that was what was
Spontaneous growth.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The whole weekend, I mean, 80 or 90 people come together. The Weller, and then all of the names that have been added to the Weller over the years. Anything else? Any other? Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Thanks, Ellie and Colleen, for joining us. I'm gonna say goodbye to you guys, but thanks so much.
Bye.